I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Syrian Arab Republic.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleagues, my country, Syria, agreed to the appointment of Mr. Lakhdar Ibrahimi as a special representative of the United Nations Secretary General. My country declared its full preparedness to cooperate with him with a view to bringing about the success of his efforts. His efforts, which he has just mentioned, I mean Mr. Ibrahimi, very clearly. In this connection, I would like to emphasize that the resignation of Mr. Kofi Annan should not be a reason to keep away from the 6-point plan adopted by Security Council Resolution 2042. We call upon all parties, Arab, regional and international, which have influence on the armed groups, particularly those states which had refused to receive Kofi Annan and refused to cooperate with him, or those states whose representatives made destructive, negative statements days after Mr. Kofi Annan took over. We invite all those states to cooperate with Mr. Ibrahimi in implementation of the commitments imposed on them by Security Council Resolution 2042, as well as the rules of international law and charter. Mr. President, the Syrian government responded with the popular demands and dealt with clarity and open-mindedness with all the efforts to solve the crisis peacefully, including the Mr. Annan 6-point plan, which regretfully some saw only 1 point which should be implemented, or half a point rather, and they disregarded the rest of the plan. Syria supported the Kofi Annan plan and cooperated with the observers mission as well as General Mode, provided all necessary facilities within the framework of the understanding agreed with the United Nations and Mr. Annan, as well as within the framework of national Syrian independence in a manner that would bring about the success of the political process to be led by Syria, as emphasized by Security Council Resolutions 2042 and 2043. This political process has been just described by the Secretary General and Mr. Lakhdar Ibrahimi. Syria officially welcomed with the final communique issued by the Action Group in Geneva on the 30th of June 2012 in accordance with the declaration made by the Syrian Ministry for Foreign Affairs. Mr. President, the operations undertaken by the order-keeping forces or the Syrian army since the beginning of the crisis proceeded from the duty devolving on the state, any state, member of the United Nations, to protect its civilians, public and private property, combating terrorism, and halting violence. It has become crystal clear to everybody, even including the Secretary General and the Secretariat's senior officials, who hesitated at the beginning, as you will recall, in seeing the presence of activities by terrorist armed groups inside Syria. It has become crystal clear to them the authenticity of the statements conveyed by our government to the member states about the presence of armed groups undertaking terrorist activities, fed, unfortunately, by Arab, regional and international parties well known to everybody by now. Yet, it is regrettable that on more than one occasion it is stated that these groups are referred to be on equal par with the Syrian government, a legitimate government that governs a sovereign state, a founding member of this organization. It has the right, according to the Charter and international law, to protect the Syrian society and preserve its security and stability. Despite the expansion of the destructive activities which constitutes a challenge to any government, in addition to the fact that these destructive activities coincide with the imposition of unprecedented comprehensive sanctions by some states on Syria, the Syrian government is well aware of its responsibilities and duties towards its people. It has geared all its energies with a view to rehabilitating the infrastructure as well as the service facilities, extending medical, food and financial assistance. It has also tried to coordinate national, governmental and non-governmental efforts to satisfy the needs of the population harmed by current events, in addition to extending all necessary facilities to international efforts to extend humanitarian assistance to the disadvantaged. That is through facilitating the arrival of international bodies and non-government NGOs to the places of the disadvantaged, including World Food Programme, which is undertaking a highly commendable work. ICRC, its chief, was in Damascus meeting with our president. The Syrian Arab Red Crescent Organization, which is undertaking mighty work in the field, in addition to full cooperation with OCHA. This has led to the elaboration of the response plan in cooperation with the UN organs working in Syria. In this connection, I would like to refer to the statement made by the Secretary General that weak funding is still constituting one of the cardinal obstacles facing this response plan. The sum total of contributions to the response plan to OCHA has not covered more than 39% of the required amount. None of the Arab or Islamic states contributed to that. At a time, the contributions to the response plan to the UNHCR has not exceeded 54%. Mr. President, we reaffirm from this rostrum the full preparedness of Syria and its welcoming of any sincere international effort to provide humanitarian assistance to Syrian citizens for exclusive humanitarian goals, taking into consideration that our people was not in need of assistance from anybody before the gross external interference in our internal affairs. This brazen interference, which is designed to destroy the infrastructure and undermine our socio-economic achievements over decades. 13 hospitals are out of service out of 38 hospitals, main hospital in the country. 70% of the medicine producing factories have been burnt in Halab. The main telecommunication cable has been targeted 20 times between Damascus, Homs, Hama and Halab, in addition to destroying hundreds of schools, plundering museums, evicting population, plundering their homes and their places of worship. Some, unfortunately, of those who are mentally aberrant have invented a new kind of jihad. They called it the struggle of, or the jihad of lusts, based on the fact that those aberrants would go to the refugee camps of the Syrians to get married to young girls whose ages are between 14 and 16 years of age. Considering this as a kind of jihad or struggle, Mr. President, from this rostrum, I am calling upon all Syrians, all my brethren of the Syrians, to participate in reconstructing the damage done by the crisis and to go side by side in restoring security and stability to our country and to the building of the state of law, which imposes rights and duties on all of us in a manner that protects the citizen from the scourges of corruption, nepotism and partiality, and in a manner that protects the state from the outlawed. All this is based naturally on the bases of tolerance, reconciliation, confidence and national joint action, away from falling victim to external agendas. All of us as Syrians are duty-bound to realize that the solution can only be Syrian-led via globally political Syrian process that satisfy the legitimate aspirations of all the citizens of Syria. That is through comprehensive national dialogue that combines all the Syrians believing in it, in our country, with a view to establishing a pluralistic democratic state where everybody will be equal. Syria enjoyed its civilizational spring, characterized over thousands of years by the fragrance of coexistence, diversity, tolerance, joint living and pioneering role. Despite this hiatus and this painful hiatus which we are facing today in our history, this spring will last thanks to the will of our citizens and not because of the will of the radical Salafite Wahhabi petrodollar, which is blindly loyal to Western hegemony over the destiny and political options of the countries. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, in conclusion, in the name of my government, I welcome the appointment of Mr. Lakhdar al-Ibrahimi, Special Representative of the UN Secretary General in Syria. And I would like to state that Syria is open-minded and fully committed to the mission of Mr. al-Ibrahimi in his endeavors to put an end to violence and find a Syrian-led, politically led solution to the crisis in Syria. This is what have been mentioned in the 6-point plan and agreed to by the Security Council, its resolutions 2042 and 2043. This is the crux of the Geneva document. On this occasion, I'm calling upon all member states, particularly those with direct influence, and I am not going to name them today, and you know whom I mean by that. Particularly those with influence on the parties rejecting political dialogue and the cessation of violence. I'm calling upon them to follow in the footsteps of the government of Syria and seriously extend a helping hand to Mr. Lakhdar al-Ibrahimi, wishing him every success. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Syrian Arab Republic. I now give the floor